Bennett Archer was known for his quiet resilience, the kind of presence that anchored movie sets and comforted colleagues alike. Yet on the day the diagnosis was delivered, even his steady gaze faltered. Friends and loved ones watched with a mix of dread and disbelief as Bennett's usual composure gave way to a wave of vulnerability. Reality can strike with an unforgiving force, turning familiar ground into something foreign and frightening. As the doctor spoke, the magnitude of the situation settled into the room like a heavy fog. For someone whose life had been built on strength, both on and off the screen, this was the first time the script felt unreadable. In that moment, every unspoken fear found voice. The moment the news took hold. The examination room was stark and quiet, save for the low hum of clinical machinery. Bennett sat flanked by close friends whose eyes, welling with emotion, reflected the shock rippling through them. When the doctor used the word chronic, it was as if the air itself thickened. Bennett tried to appear strong. He always had. But strength can be a fragile thing when confronted with uncertainty. The glimmer in his eyes dimmed as the implications of the diagnosis anchored into his consciousness. There was no dramatic collapse, just a quiet unraveling of the composure he wore like armor. In that stillness, surrounded by the people who mattered most, his heartbreak was plain to see, a raw testament to the weight of the unknown. A series of tests that led here. Bennett hadn't arrived at that examination room by chance. For months, he had been navigating a maze of medical tests, seeking answers to recurring health concerns that had unsettled him more with each passing day. What began as minor symptoms had demanded increasingly thorough investigations, leaving him oscillating between hope and apprehension. Each appointment brought a new specialist, a new scan, a new set of waiting rooms, and whispered speculations. Friends tried to reassure him, offering optimism where uncertainty loomed. Yet with every diagnostic image and medical report, Bennett felt the distance between his expectations and reality grow. It was a journey marked by patience, fear, and the creeping realization that this was no fleeting discomfort, but something more enduring. When family becomes the strongest support. In times of crisis, the branches of a family can bend toward one another with surprising strength. Bennett's loved ones rallied with a quiet ferocity, offering comfort in the face of mounting worry. His spouse, Eliza, ever his closest confidant, stayed by his side, providing moments of peace when the world seemed impossibly heavy. Even relationships that had faded into history were reignited by hope and concern. Past partners reached out, their messages laced with empathy and shared history. There were no lingering grievances in those moments, only a collective desire to see Bennett through. In their combined presence, he found a fragile solace, reminding him that though the path ahead was uncertain, he would not walk it alone. A stoic heart meets its match. Bennett's career was built on portrayals of stoicism and strength, characters who stood unbreakable in the face of adversity. Yet life has a way of humbling even the most composed spirits. When confronted with his own vulnerability, Bennett's facade cracked, revealing the depth of his fear. He asked the questions that no one wants to voice. Would he be able to see his children grow up? Could he continue pursuing the craft he loved? These weren't mere professional concerns. They were reflections of his deepest hopes and anxieties, laid bare. Surrounded by those who cherished him, he grappled with the truth that life, like any great story, can veer into unexpected chapters that demand more courage than any role he had ever played. The ripple. Through an industry news of Bennett's health situation didn't stay confined to hospital corridors and family group chats. The film community, a network of collaborators, fans, and fellow actors who had admired him for decades, responded with an outpouring of support. Messages of love, solidarity, and shared admiration flooded social feeds. Some spoke of Bennett's on-screen magic. Others recalled moments of kindness or mentorship he'd offered behind the scenes. There was an unmistakable current of collective heartbreak, a reminder of how deeply one life can touch so many others. In an industry built on spectacle and fame, this moment felt profoundly human. A reminder that vulnerability binds us all, regardless of the spotlight under which we live. Emotions unfiltered, fear and sadness behind the polished interviews and carefully curated public image, there exists a private realm where fear and sadness take shape without restraint. Bennett's closest friends described a period marked by emotional turbulence, fragments of hope entangled with waves of doubt. There were moments of laughter, fragile and fleeting, trying to hold back the shadow of what loomed ahead. And there were moments of silence so heavy, it seemed impossible to breathe. Yet even in those low points, there was an undercurrent of resolve, a quiet insistence that despair would not dictate the terms of his life. In truth, courage often looks less like fearlessness and more like persistence in the face of fear. And in Bennett's eyes, that quiet persistence never fully disappeared. Navigating a new reality, treatment, and tomorrow. With diagnosis now behind him, Bennett turned his focus to what could be controlled, a treatment plan designed to offer structure and stability. It included regular therapy sessions to support his mental well-being, carefully monitored medication, and significant lifestyle changes aimed at promoting health. Each adjustment, while daunting, represented a step toward a future in which Bennett could continue to thrive, even if differently than before. There were no guarantees, and there was no promised timeline for resolution. But in the daily routine of appointments, reflections, and gentle self-care, he discovered a new rhythm. It was a rhythm born not of denial, but of acceptance. And in that acceptance, a paradoxical sense of hope began to grow. Projects on hold, but spirit-unbroken professional commitments, once the backbone of Bennett's schedule, now rested in an uncertain limbo. Upcoming roles, public appearances, and creative ventures were being reevaluated in light of his health priorities. To fans, this uncertainty was difficult to reconcile with the image of the ever-active artist they admired. But while external expectations shifted, Bennett's internal compass remained steady. He found unwavering joy in the small moments, reading to his children, sharing quiet dinners with loved ones, and reflecting on the legacy he hoped to build beyond the screen. His passion for storytelling hadn't vanished. It had simply taken on new meaning. And in the eyes of those closest to him, that enduring spark was as powerful as any spotlight. A life measured in more than roles, Bennett Archer's journey is not defined solely by a diagnosis or a chapter of struggle. It is shaped by the relationships that sustain him, the resilience that carries him forward, and the unwavering support of a community that refuses to let him stand alone. Though the road ahead remains uncertain, a path without script or guarantee, there is a spirit within him that refuses to yield to fear. Life's most defining battles are often fought out of view, away from applause and acclaim. In Bennett's story, we are reminded that true courage is not the absence of fear, but the steadfast choice to continue, to love deeply, hope bravely, and face each new day with an open heart.